Don't let them take it, she whispered to herself, fingers tightening around the thin veil as if it were the last piece of dignity she owned. The marble beneath Elena Whitmore's feet felt cold even through the worn soles of her shoes, a steady chill that climbed up her spine while the vast royal hall breathed around her like something alive, heavy with perfume, polished stone, and quiet judgment. She couldn't see the hundreds gathered, but she could feel them, every shift of fabric, every restrained breath, every flicker of disdain pressing into her skin. Somewhere high above, banners stirred softly, their movement carried down in faint currents of air that brushed her cheeks, and she knew exactly where she stood, at the edge, where the unwanted were placed, where no one expected her to belong. A blind Omega. A voice murmured not far from her left, too soft to be called out, yet sharp enough to cut, followed by a ripple of hushed amusement that rolled through the crowd like a tide she couldn't escape. Elena kept her head lowered, not in submission, but in focus, counting her breaths the way she always did when the world grew too loud. 1, 2, 3, steady, quiet, contained. The veil draped over her face was thin, almost weightless, yet it shielded her from something far heavier than sight. It was the barrier between her and their expressions, between her and the certainty of how they saw her. Footsteps echoed across the vast chamber, measured, confident, deliberate, and the entire room seemed to shift in response, conversations fading into silence as attention snapped toward the center, toward power, toward the throne she could not see but could feel like a pressure in the air. Elena's pulse picked up, not from fear, but from the change, the subtle tightening of the atmosphere that made every instinct inside her sharpen. She adjusted her grip on the veil, fingertips brushing the delicate fabric, grounding herself in its texture, in something familiar. Then it happened, not with warning, not with ceremony, but with a sudden, careless motion. A hand, cold and firm, caught the edge of her veil and tore it away in one swift pull. The fabric slipped from her grasp. Before she could react, the sensation of loss immediate and startling, like the sudden absence of warmth. Gasps followed, then a pause, a suspended moment where even the air seemed to hold still, as if the room itself was deciding what came next. Elena did not reach for the veil. She did not cover her face. Instead, she stood there, shoulders trembling just once before stilling, chin lifting by the smallest fraction as the weight of unseen eyes crashed over her without mercy. Now everyone can see, the same voice said, louder this time, edged with satisfaction. Elena's heart hammered, each beat loud in her ears, but she did not bow, did not retreat into herself the way they expected. She stood, exposed in a way she had always been, only now without the illusion of protection. And then, cutting through the silence like a shift in gravity, came a sound, low, solid, unmistakable, the scrape of a throne being moved. Every whisper died instantly, every breath held, and for the first time since she stepped into that hall, Elena felt something change, something vast and undeniable turning toward her, as if the world itself had just taken notice. The sound did not echo loudly, yet it carried through the hall with a weight that pressed against every chest, a quiet authority that demanded stillness rather than noise. Elena felt it before she understood it, a shift in the air, so profound it seemed to steady the ground beneath her feet. The presence moved, not hurried, not uncertain, but deliberate, each step measured in a way that made the distance between them feel smaller than it was, as if space itself yielded. She could hear it now, the faint rhythm of boots against polished stone, the soft brush of fabric that did not whisper like the others, but moved with a controlled silence. And beneath it all, something deeper, something instinctive that her body recognized before her mind could form it into thought. Around her, no one spoke. Even the ones who had laughed moments ago held their breath, their earlier confidence dissolving into something brittle and careful. Elena's fingers curled slightly at her sides, no longer searching for the veil that had been taken, but anchoring herself in the moment, in the quiet storm gathering just beyond her reach. The footsteps stopped close enough that she could feel the warmth of another presence in front of her, not overwhelming, not invasive, but undeniably there, steady and grounded. She did not lower her head. She did not step back. Instead, she lifted her chin just enough to face forward, her unseeing eyes fixed into the space where she sensed him standing. The silence stretched, not empty but full, thick with something unspoken, as though the entire hall waited for a single breath to decide what came next. Then a voice, low and even, broke through, not raised, not harsh, yet carrying across the chamber with a clarity that reached every corner. Who touched her? The words were simple, but they did not ask for an answer so much as demand truth, and Elena felt the tension ripple outward, a collective hesitation that swept through the crowd. No one moved. No one claimed responsibility. The absence of sound spoke louder than any confession. She felt a shift again, smaller this time, closer, as if he had taken one step nearer, closing the final distance between them. The air around her warmed subtly, and with it came something unfamiliar, something steady that did not judge, did not press, did not weigh her down. For the first time since the veil had been taken, the crushing awareness of the crowd receded, replaced by a singular focus that centered entirely on her. A hand moved, not touching her skin, not yet, but close enough that she felt the faint displacement of air, the awareness of intention without contact. It lingered there, as if waiting, as if offering rather than taking. Elena's breath caught, not from fear, but from the unexpected gentleness in that pause. Then the voice spoke again, quieter now, meant for her, and yet somehow heard by all. You will not lower your head. It was not a command delivered with force, but a statement spoken with certainty, as if it described something already true. Elena swallowed, her throat tight, her heart still unsteady, but she did not move. Around them, the silence deepened, reverent now, fragile in a way that felt like the edge of something irreversible. And in that stillness, Elena realized that whatever came next would not return the world to what it had been moments before, because something had already changed, something unseen but undeniable, and it was standing right in front of her. The words settled over her like something solid, something she could lean against, and for a moment Elena forgot the crowd entirely, forgot the whispers and the humiliation, because that single sentence held her in place more firmly than fear ever had. Her shoulders, still tense from the shock, eased just slightly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for her to breathe deeper, steadier, as if the air itself had changed. She could feel him closer now, not through sight, but through presence, through the quiet intensity that surrounded him like a boundary no one dared cross. Somewhere behind her, a faint shuffle broke the stillness, hesitant, uncertain, followed by a voice that tried to sound composed but carried a tremor beneath it. Your Majesty, it was only a misunderstanding. The words hung in the air, fragile and unconvincing, and Elena felt the shift in attention, the way the room leaned toward that voice and then immediately recoiled, as if even speaking had been a mistake. The man in front of her did not respond right away. The pause stretched, deliberate, and in that silence, Elena sensed something she had never felt before, not directed at her, but radiating outward, controlled and absolute. When he spoke again, his tone did not rise, did not sharpen, yet it carried a weight that made the explanation crumble without being directly challenged. A misunderstanding does not require an audience. The quiet authority in his voice left no room for argument, and the tension that followed was immediate, thick enough that Elena could feel it pressing against her skin. No one answered. No one moved. The absence of denial spoke louder than any defense. Elena's heart beat faster, but not with the same fragile panic as before. There was something different now, something steadier beneath it, as if her body had recognized that the ground beneath her was no longer shifting. She became aware again of where she stood, of the vast hall, of the countless eyes she could not see but could still feel. Only now their weight had changed, no longer sharp and cutting, but uncertain, watchful. The presence before her shifted slightly, closer still, until the distance between them felt almost non-existent, and she felt it again, that subtle movement of air, that careful intention. This time, when his hand lifted, it did not hover. It rose above her head, slow and precise, and she felt the faintest whisper of movement as something was removed, something carried with him rather than worn by her. The room seemed to inhale as one, a collective realization forming before it was spoken. Elena did not understand it yet, but she felt it, the gravity of the moment settling into her bones, making her stand straighter without thinking. Her breath caught as the object in his hand moved, lowering toward her, not heavy, not forced, but deliberate in a way that made it feel inevitable. When it touched her, it was not cold as she expected, but warm from him, resting gently against her head, steady and sure. A crown. The realization came not from sight, but from the way the room reacted, from the sudden drop of every gaze, from the instinctive shift of hundreds of bodies lowering in unison. The silence that followed was no longer uncertain. It was reverent. And in that stillness, Elena felt something she had never known before, not pity, not dismissal, but recognition, undeniable and complete, as if the world that had once pushed her to the edges had just placed her at its very center. The weight of it settled not just on her head, but into her very being, grounding her in a way nothing ever had before. And Elena stood there with the crown resting against her hair, her breath slow and careful, as if any sudden movement might break the moment, might return everything to what it had been. But nothing shifted back, nothing unraveled, because the silence around her held firm, shaped now by something stronger than ridicule. She could feel it in the way the room had changed, in the lowered heads, in the absence of whispers, in the way no one dared to move without permission. The presence before her remained steady, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the quiet certainty that seemed to anchor the entire hall. For a long moment, he said nothing, and that silence carried more meaning than any declaration could have, because it allowed the reality to settle into every corner of the room, into every mind that had just witnessed what could not be undone. Elena's hands trembled once at her sides, a small, involuntary motion, but she steadied them, drawing in a breath that filled her lungs more fully than before, as if the air itself had opened for her. She became aware of the crown again, not heavy, but present, its gentle pressure a constant reminder that something had shifted in a way she did not yet fully understand. "Lift your head," the voice in front of her said, quieter now, not commanding, but guiding, and she realized with a flicker of surprise that she had already done so, that her posture had changed without her noticing, her spine straight, her chin level. A faint exhale moved through the crowd, almost imperceptible, as though they too recognized what was happening, the quiet transformation taking place without spectacle, without force. Somewhere to her right, fabric rustled as someone shifted position, followed by the soft, careful sound of knees meeting stone, then another, and another, until the entire hall seemed to move in unison, a synchronized acknowledgement that rippled outward like a tide. Elena felt it more than heard it, the collective motion, the subtle vibration through the floor beneath her feet, and it sent a strange, unfamiliar warmth through her chest, something close to disbelief, but steadier, stronger. She had spent her life being overlooked, dismissed, placed at the edges where she would not disrupt the order of things, and yet now the order itself had turned toward her. The man in front of her shifted slightly, not stepping away, but repositioning as if to stand beside her rather than above, and that single adjustment carried meaning that resonated deeper than words. "Let them see you," he said, and there was something different in his tone now, something almost quiet beneath the authority, as if the statement was meant not only for the crowd but for her as well. Elena's breath caught again, but this time she did not fight it, did not retreat inward. Instead, she allowed herself to exist in that space, uncovered, unhidden, her face turned toward a room she could not see but could now feel in an entirely new way. The weight of judgment had vanished, replaced by something else entirely, something that did not press down but lifted, subtle yet undeniable. And in that moment, standing beside the one who had changed everything without raising his voice, Elena understood that what had been taken from her had not been her shield, but her cage, and what had been placed upon her was not simply a crown, but a truth the world could no longer ignore. The warmth in her chest did not fade. It grew, slow and steady, like something awakening after being buried for years, and Elena found herself standing taller without thinking, her body aligning with a truth she had never been allowed to claim before. The crown rested securely, unmoving, as if it had always belonged there, as if it recognized her in a way the world never had. Around her, the hall remained lowered, the quiet reverence holding firm, But beneath it she could sense something else beginning to stir, something unsettled, something that did not accept this shift so easily. A voice, careful and strained, broke through from somewhere ahead, carried low as if testing the boundaries of what was permitted. "Your Majesty, this is highly irregular." The words were chosen with precision, respectful on the surface, yet edged with resistance that had not fully retreated. Elena felt the shift ripple again, the subtle tightening of the air, the way attention snapped back toward the center where she stood. The presence beside her did not move immediately, and that stillness stretched just long enough to make the objection feel smaller, weaker, as if it had already begun to collapse under its own weight. When he spoke, his tone remained calm, but there was something final in it now, something that did not invite further challenge. "So is cruelty mistaken for tradition?" The statement settled into the space with quiet force, and the tension that followed did not rise into chaos. It folded inward, contained, controlled. No one answered. No one dared to press further. Elena's breath slowed again, her senses adjusting to this new reality, to the way the room responded not with dominance or spectacle, but with absolute certainty. She became aware of the faintest movement near her side as he shifted slightly, and then, unexpectedly, she felt it, a gentle touch at her hand, brief and steady, not possessive, not demanding, but grounding, as if to confirm that she was not standing alone. The contact lasted only a moment, yet it sent a quiet reassurance through her, anchoring her more firmly than anything else could have. "You were told to stand in the shadows," he said softly, his voice lower now, meant only for her though the room seemed to listen anyway. "That was never your place." The words settled deep, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable, and Elena felt something inside her shift in response, something that had always been there, but had never been given permission to exist. Her fingers relaxed slightly, no longer clenched with the need to hold on to what had been taken, because she understood now that nothing of value had been lost. The veil had hidden her from them, but it had also hidden her from herself, and without it, there was nothing left to retreat behind. Around them, the hall remained still, but the energy had changed completely, no longer pressing her down, but holding her in place, as if the very structure of the world had adjusted to accommodate her presence. Elena inhaled slowly, the air filling her lungs with a clarity she had never known, and for the first time, she did not feel small within it. She felt seen, not through sight, but through something far deeper, something that resonated in the silence, in the bowed heads, in the unwavering presence at her side. And as she stood there, crowned and unhidden, she realized that whatever path had brought her to this moment had not been a series of losses, but a quiet preparation for something she had never dared to imagine, something that had now become impossible to deny. The quiet did not break, it deepened, settling into something unshakable, something that no longer felt fragile but absolute, and Elena stood within it, aware now of every subtle shift in the room, every breath carefully measured by those around her, as if they feared disturbing what had just been set into place. The crown remained steady, its presence no longer unfamiliar, but grounding, as though it carried not weight but certainty, and she felt it with every heartbeat, a reminder that what had happened was not fleeting, not a moment that would fade once attention turned elsewhere. Beside her, his presence did not waver, and that alone seemed to hold the entire hall in alignment, as though no one dared move beyond the boundaries he defined without effort. A faint movement stirred somewhere ahead, followed by the careful rise of a voice that carried more caution now than resistance. "Your Majesty, the council will require." It stopped before the sentence could complete, as if the speaker had realized mid-thought that whatever requirement they intended to name no longer held the same authority. The silence that followed was not tense, it was expectant, and Elena felt the subtle shift again, the way the air responded to him rather than anyone else. He did not turn toward the voice immediately, and that pause spoke clearly, reinforcing what everyone already understood. When he did speak, it was not louder, not harsher, but final in a way that closed the matter before it could begin. "The council will adjust." The words carried no explanation, no justification, only certainty, and the effect was immediate, the last remnants of hesitation dissolving into quiet acceptance. Elena felt the change ripple outward, A collective acknowledgement that what stood beside her now defined the rules that followed, not the ones that had existed before. Her fingers shifted slightly, brushing against the side of her dress, grounding herself in the texture, in the present, as her thoughts tried to catch up with the reality unfolding around her. She had spent so long navigating a world that had already decided her place that the absence of those limits felt almost unreal, like stepping into open space after years of confinement. And yet, nothing about this moment felt uncertain. Everything held, firm and unyielding, shaped by something stronger than doubt. The presence beside her moved again, not stepping away, but aligning fully at her side, and she sensed the subtle change in direction, the way his body angled forward, as if preparing to move not alone, but with her. "Walk with me," he said. The words simple, steady, offered without force, yet leaving no room for refusal, and Elena felt her breath catch once more, not from fear, but from the realization of what that meant. Not hidden, not escorted away, but brought forward, into the center, into the space she had never been allowed to occupy. For a fraction of a second, hesitation flickered through her, a memory of every moment she had been told to stay back, to remain unseen, but it faded as quickly as it came, replaced by the quiet strength that had been building inside her since the veil had fallen. She took a step. The sound of her movement echoed softly across the marble, and with it came another shift, the entire hall adjusting once more, bodies turning, attention following, not with judgment, but with something far closer to respect. She did not rush, did not falter, each step measured and steady, guided not by sight but by the presence beside her, by the unspoken assurance that she would not be left behind. And as they moved together through the hall, Elena understood that this was no longer a moment of change, but the beginning of something that would not be undone, something that had already reshaped the world around her in ways that would continue long after this night had ended. Each step echoed with quiet clarity, the soft contact of her shoes against marble marking a rhythm that the entire hall seemed to follow, and Elena felt it, the way attention shifted with her movement, not chasing her in ridicule as it once had, but aligning with her, adjusting to her presence as if it had always belonged there. The space ahead opened, not because she could see it, but because she could feel the absence of obstruction, the subtle way the air changed when nothing stood in her path. Beside her, his pace matched hers without effort, neither leading nor pulling, but moving in a way that allowed her to stand fully within the moment rather than be carried through it. The crown remained steady, its warmth lingering, and with every step, it felt less like something placed upon her and more like something that had always been waiting. Around them, the silence was no longer uncertain. It was intentional, shaped by respect rather than fear, and Elena could sense the difference in the smallest details, in the way fabric shifted more carefully, in the restrained breaths that followed their passing. Somewhere behind them, a voice lowered itself to a whisper, quickly silenced, as if even quiet doubt no longer had space to exist. They moved farther into the heart of the hall, toward a place she had never been allowed to approach, and she felt it before they reached it, the subtle rise in presence, the layered weight of history and authority that lingered in the center. When they stopped, the stillness returned, deeper now, settled into something final. Elena held her position, her breathing even, her senses sharpened, aware of him beside her and of the countless others beyond, all waiting without realizing what they were waiting for. Then he turned, not away from her, but toward the room, and she felt the shift in his stance, the quiet expansion of something that did not need to be seen to be understood. When he spoke, his voice carried with the same calm authority as before, but now it filled the space completely, reaching every corner without effort. "You will remember this night," he said, not raised, not forced, but absolute, and the words settled into the hall like something permanent. Elena felt the resonance of it, not just in the air, but within herself, as if the statement extended beyond the room, beyond the moment, into something that would last. There was no challenge, no interruption, only the steady acceptance of what had been declared through action and now affirmed in words. A subtle shift followed, not from him, but from her, as realization deepened, not sudden, but unfolding, each piece settling into place. She was no longer standing at the edge. She was no longer unseen. The world that had once defined her as lesser had just been forced to redefine itself around her presence. The awareness was not overwhelming. It was grounding, steadying her in a way that replaced uncertainty with clarity. She lifted her chin slightly, not out of defiance, but out of alignment with the truth that had been placed upon her without hesitation. The crown did not feel foreign anymore. It felt right. And as the silence held, filled with understanding rather than doubt, Elena realized that this moment was not the end of something painful, but the beginning of something far greater, something that had already begun to reshape not only how the world saw her, but how she would move within it from this moment forward. The words lingered in the air long after they were spoken, not fading but settling, becoming part of the very structure of the room, and Elena felt them resonate within her, steady and unyielding, as if they had always been waiting for this moment to be heard. The silence that followed was no longer filled with anticipation. It was filled with understanding, a quiet acceptance that moved through the hall like a slow, inevitable tide. No one shifted out of place. No one dared to break the stillness, because something had been set into motion that could not be reversed. Elena stood within it, her posture no longer uncertain, her breath even, her presence aligned with the reality that had just been declared. The crown rested against her, warm and constant, and she no longer noticed its presence as something separate from herself. It had become part of her awareness, part of how she stood, how she held her head, how she existed in the space around her. Beside her, he remained still, not imposing, not overshadowing, but steady in a way that allowed her to stand fully in her own place without question. A subtle shift moved through the gathered crowd, not in defiance, but in response, as if they were adjusting to a new balance that had already taken hold. Elena could feel it in the air, the change in how they regarded her, no longer with dismissal, but with careful attention, with something that carried the weight of recognition. The difference was unmistakable. For the first time, she was not being measured against expectation, she was defining it. A faint movement came from the far side of the hall, the soft brush of fabric as someone rose carefully from where they had knelt, followed by another, and another, until the room slowly returned to standing, not abruptly, not carelessly, but with deliberate respect. The shift was subtle, yet it carried meaning, a silent acknowledgement that what had been established would now continue beyond this moment. Elena remained still, allowing the change to settle fully, her senses attuned to every detail, every quiet adjustment, every measured breath. She did not retreat into herself, did not shrink under the attention, because it no longer felt like pressure, it felt like space, like something had opened where before there had been none. "Look at me," the voice beside her said quietly, and though she could not see him, she turned her face toward him without hesitation, guided by the presence she had come to recognize so clearly. The moment held, not long, but long enough for something unspoken to pass between them, something that did not need sight to exist. Then, gently, he reached forward, not to remove what had been placed upon her, but to adjust it slightly, ensuring it rested securely, precisely where it belonged. The touch was brief, careful, and it carried with it a finality that settled deep within her. Around them, the hall remained quiet, but the stillness had changed once more, no longer defined by what had happened, but by what would come next. Elena drew in a slow breath, steady and full, and for the first time, she allowed herself to stand not as someone who had been brought forward, but as someone who belonged there. And as the moment stretched into something lasting, she understood that the world had not simply changed around her, it had recognized her, and in doing so, it had revealed a truth that had always been waiting beneath everything she had been told to believe. The quiet did not fade when the moment passed. It remained, woven into the very air of the hall, carrying forward with every breath, every movement, every thought that followed, and Elena stood within it, no longer waiting for something to be taken from her, no longer bracing for the next moment of dismissal. Instead, she felt something steady beneath her, something unshakable, like the ground itself had finally settled after years of uncertainty. The crown rested easily now, not as a reminder of what had happened, but as a reflection of what had been revealed, and she no longer questioned its place. She understood it, not through explanation, but through the way the world around her had aligned in response to it. Beside her, he remained, not as a figure to stand behind, but as one who stood with her, his presence no longer the only source of strength in the space, because she had found her own within it. The hall slowly returned to motion, not abruptly, not carelessly, but with a quiet order that followed the new balance that had been established. Conversations did not rise immediately, laughter did not return. Instead, there was a careful awareness in every step, every gesture, as if all who stood there were adjusting to something they could not yet fully name but could not ignore. Elena listened to it all, the subtle rhythm of a world recalibrating, and she did not shrink from it. She stood, grounded and certain, allowing the moment to extend beyond itself, to become something lasting rather than fleeting. A faint sound reached her then, soft and deliberate, the approach of someone who moved with care rather than confidence, stopping a few feet away. There was hesitation in the air, not fear, but something closer to respect, something that had not been there before. Elena did not turn away. She did not step back. She remained as she was, present and unhidden. The voice that followed was lower, quieter than the ones before, stripped of mockery, stripped of assumption. "My lady." The words settled gently, not forced, not exaggerated, but real, and Elena felt them, not as a title imposed upon her, but as a recognition freely given. It was the first, but it would not be the last. She drew in a slow breath, letting it fill her completely, letting the sound of it ground her in the present, and for a moment, everything else faded, leaving only the steady rhythm of her heartbeat and the quiet certainty that had taken root within her. She did not need to see the room to understand it now. She did not need the veil to protect her from it. What had once been a barrier had fallen away, and in its place stood something far stronger, something that could not be removed by careless hands or quiet cruelty. The world had shifted, not because she had forced it to, but because the truth of who she was had finally been recognized. And as she stood there, crowned and acknowledged, Elena realized that this was not the end of a single moment, but the beginning of a path that would carry forward, shaping everything that came after. The echoes of this night would not fade. They would remain. In every glance she could not see